The sign said Motel Neversleep. I should have taken that as a warning, not an invitation. The road was empty, the air thick with rain and static when I pulled in, just a single row of rooms, half lit by dying neon. The clerk smiled too long, his eyes never blinking, as he handed me the key to room 12. Inside, the clock on the wall was frozen, but I swear I heard it tick backward. They say this place never rests. They're right. The walls breathe, the whispers never stop, and once you check in, you don't wake up the same. The night was thick with silence as I drove down the lonely back road, the tires of my old sedan crunching against gravel and cracked asphalt. Ahead, a neon sign buzzed and flickered erratically, the words Motel Neversleep glowing in jagged red letters that seemed to swallow the darkness rather than illuminate it. I slowed, the dull ache of exhaustion gnawing at my bones after a long day on the road. The promise of a bed, any bed, was enough to draw me in. The motel huddled against the horizon like a forgotten relic, its low, squat buildings lined in a single row, windows dark and empty except for the occasional flicker of movement. The air was still, unnervingly so, as if the world itself had paused here. I killed the engine and stepped out, the cold night air biting at my skin. The sign buzzed unevenly, casting long, jittery shadows across the cracked pavement. I hesitated before the lobby door, a faded brass plate announcing reception barely visible under years of grime. Inside, a dull yellow light hummed overhead, revealing a sparse room dominated by a worn counter and a row of mismatched chairs. The smell was a strange blend of stale cigarette smoke and something older, like damp wood left to rot. Behind the counter stood the night clerk, a man whose features were sharp but softened by fatigue. His dark hair was slicked back neatly, and his uniform, though rumpled, bore a name tag that read Mr. Hale. He smiled politely as I approached, his voice calm and measured as he greeted me. "Welcome to Motel Neversleep," he said. "Checking in," I nodded, placing my briefcase on the counter. "Just for the night." He handed me a key attached to a chipped plastic fob numbered 12, room 12. "If you need anything, just call the front desk." I glanced around the lobby, my eyes caught by a row of clocks mounted on the far wall. Each one ticked steadily, but none showed the same time. One was frozen at 3:17, another ticked wildly ahead, and a third lagged behind as if it struggled to keep pace with the others. I frowned, but the clerk's smile never wavered. "Is there a reason the clocks don't match?" I asked, curiosity tinged with unease. "Old building," he replied smoothly. "Some things don't keep time here like they do elsewhere." I tried to laugh it off, but a chill ran down my spine. The motel felt like it was out of sync with the world, as if it existed in a bubble where normal rules didn't apply. I made my way down the narrow corridor, the carpet muffling my footsteps. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling in places to reveal stained plaster. The faint hum of the neon sign outside leaked in through the cracked window, casting an eerie red glow that made the shadows dance. I passed several doors, some slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of rooms with belongings that looked oddly familiar, clothes that might have belonged to me or someone like me, scattered carelessly. I paused, a strange sensation of déjà vu washing over me. From somewhere deeper in the hallway, a soft whisper floated, unintelligible but persistent. I spun around, catching only the flutter of shadows retreating just beyond my line of sight. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Room 12 was exactly as expected, small, functional, and tired. The single bed was made up with thin sheets, and a clock hung on the wall, its hands frozen at 2:03. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging beneath me. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I reached into my bag for a flask but hesitated, the weight of the place settling over me. Something was wrong here. Time felt fractured, stretched thin, like a rubber band pulled taut and ready to snap. As I lay back and stared at the ceiling, the muffled sounds of footsteps echoed in the hallway. But when I sat up and looked, the corridor was empty, the shadows still. I told myself to rest, that it was just the weariness of the road playing tricks on me. Yet, as I drifted towards sleep, a fleeting image flickered in the corner of my eye. a figure, pale and indistinct, standing just beyond the door. When I blinked, it was gone. I closed my eyes, but the uneasy feeling lingered, a whisper at the edge of my mind, promising that this was no ordinary stopover. The Motel Neversleep was waiting, patient and unyielding, for whatever came next. The neon glow from the flickering motel sign barely penetrated the thick darkness that enshrouded the back road. But inside, the air was thick, with a silence that felt almost tangible. I stepped cautiously into the dim corridor, my footsteps echoing softly against the cracked linoleum floor. The walls, papered in a faded floral pattern peeling at the edges, seemed to close in, suffocating me with their stillness. Somewhere beyond a door down the hall, a faint whisper curled around the edges of my hearing, indecipherable, yet unmistakably there. I spun toward the sound, but the corridor was empty, save for shadows that shifted just beyond my vision. I pressed forward, each step heavier than the last, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and growing apprehension. Doors lined the hallway, their numbers peeling and their wood warped by age. As I passed, I noticed small details that stirred a strange familiarity. An old leather jacket draped over a chair in one room, a pair of worn shoes by the door that mirrored my own style from years past. I hesitated, heart pounding, and peered inside. The room was frozen in a moment of time. A cracked photograph lay face up on the nightstand, capturing a younger man with hopeful eyes who looked hauntingly like me. A chill ran down my spine. How could these things be here? Why did it feel like the motel was whispering secrets about me, unraveling strands of my life I'd long buried? I moved on, the air growing colder, the shadows deeper. The hallway seemed to stretch and twist in ways that defied logic. The same door I'd passed moments ago appeared again, but numbered differently. Signs pointing left and right contradicted each other, sending me spinning in circles. Then, in the faint light spilling from a cracked door at the corridor's end, I saw it, a mirror streaked with grime and age. I approached, compelled by a force I couldn't name. My reflection shimmered, distorted by the cracked glass, but then it sharpened, revealing a face older, worn by years I hadn't lived yet. The eyes stared back with a hollow intensity that froze me in place. The same eyes, but shadowed by despair and something darker. I blinked, and the image flickered and vanished, leaving only my own pale face staring back. Panic surged through me as the whispers grew louder, footsteps echoing just beyond reach. I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Desperately, I tried to retrace my steps to the exit, but the hallways shifted beneath my feet. Doors I was sure I'd passed were nowhere to be found, replaced by blank, unyielding walls. Each turn looped me back, the signage a maddening puzzle that defied all reason. Trapped in this labyrinth of time and memory, I realized the motel was more than a place. It was a prison. A place where the past bled into the present, where identities fractured and merged. And somewhere in the shifting shadows, I was not alone. The echoes of myself, old and new, whispered warnings I could barely comprehend. I was caught in their midst, a traveler lost between moments, unable to escape the motel's inexorable pull. As the night deepened, the corridor's flickering lights cast grotesque shapes that danced along the walls. I pressed my back against the cold plaster, heart hammering in my chest, the realization sinking in. This place was alive with my own fractured existence, and I was becoming just another echo in its endless, looping hallway. And yet I had to find a way out, if only I could remember who I was before the motel began to unravel me. But the motel had other plans. The whispers returned, closer this time, and the footsteps quickened, circling me in the darkness, promising that the echoes of my past were not done with me yet. I pushed open the door to room 12 and froze. There, sitting motionless on the bed, was a man who looked exactly like me, only older. His hair was streaked with gray, his face marked by lines I knew would only come with years I hadn't yet lived. His eyes met mine, hollow and tired, as if carrying a weight no one should bear. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. He smiled sadly. "You don't remember yet, but you will." The air was thick with a strange stillness, as if the room itself held its breath. I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me with a sound that echoed far too long. "What is this place?" "A rest stop for lost travelers," he said, voice barely above a murmur. "We checked in, but we never checked out." My mind raced. The motel, the strange signs, the shifting clocks, it all made horrifying sense. "How long have you been here?" He looked away, eyes fixed on the peeling wallpaper. "Time doesn't pass here the way it does outside. Days, years, they're all tangled. I've lost count." I swallowed hard. "Is there a way out?" "No," he said simply. "Not for us." Shaken, I left the room and wandered the dim corridor. Doors lined the hallway like silent witnesses. A faint whispering brushed past my ears, snippets of conversations, laughter and tears intermingled and fading. I tried the next door, room 14, and found another version of myself. A man older still, his eyes sunken, his clothes rumpled as if he hadn't moved in days. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "The motel feeds on us, keeps us alive, but never lets us go." "Who's responsible for this?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded toward the lobby. "The clerk." Heart pounding, I made my way back to the front desk, where the night clerk stood waiting, his pale face illuminated by the flickering neon outside. His smile was thin, controlled, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Welcome back," he said softly. "I trust your stay is enlightening." "What are you?" I demanded. His eyes darkened, and for a moment the calm facade cracked, revealing something ancient and terrible beneath. "I am the keeper of this place," he said. "The cycle must continue." I turned away, breath shallow, and caught my reflection in the lobby's cracked mirror. The face was mine, yet flickering, shifting through the faces of my older selves, each marked by the slow decay of endless waiting. A cold realization settled over me. I was becoming them, lost, trapped, forgotten. "You'll understand soon enough," the clerk's voice whispered behind me. I bolted from the lobby, the corridors twisting and lengthening as I ran. But no matter how far I pushed forward, the motel's walls closed in tighter, its time-bending corridors looping back on themselves. My footsteps echoed endlessly, chasing shadows that dissolved whenever I tried to grasp them. In that moment, I knew the truth. The Motel Neversleep was not just a place, but a prison for fractured selves, and I was being pulled into its maw. As I collapsed against the cold wood of a doorframe, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. "Stay, stay," but I couldn't, not yet. I had to find a way out, before I became another lost version of myself, forever trapped in the motel's cursed hospitality. And yet, deep down, fear gnawed at my resolve. Was escape even possible? Or was my fate sealed the moment I stepped beneath the flickering neon sign? The night stretched on, endless and unyielding. Somewhere, behind another door, another me waited. And the cycle spun onward, relentless as the stars outside the windows that never quite aligned with the night beyond. I swallowed my fear and pressed forward, chasing a hope that flickered like the neon sign outside, fragile, uncertain, but still burning. This was no ordinary motel. This was a labyrinth of time, identity, and despair, and I was caught in its heart. I found myself drawn to the office once more, compelled by a gnawing curiosity I couldn't shake. The dim glow of the desk lamp barely illuminated the cramped space, its light flickering like the neon sign outside. Among piles of outdated forms and dusty ledgers, a yellowed newspaper clipping caught my eye. The headline screamed about a fire, decades old, that had obliterated the original Motel Neversleep. The article recounted the tragedy in cold, bureaucratic prose. A blaze that had claimed the lives of several guests and staff, the cause never definitively determined, the building never rebuilt, except somehow it had. As I read, a chill settled over me. The dates didn't add up. The fire had been reported 30 years ago, yet the motel's current incarnation bore no scars, no memories of that devastation. It was as if the motel existed out of time, a place caught between past and present, feeding on the lost souls trapped within. The truth was sinking in, heavy and suffocating. This was no ordinary roadside stopover. It was a trap. Determined to leave, I rose and stepped into the hallway, but the familiar corridors seemed strange, twisting subtly, the walls breathing in slow, imperceptible pulses. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting long, wavering shadows that danced at the edge of vision. I tried the door at the end of the hall, but it led only to another corridor, longer and more labyrinthine than before. Panic prickled my skin as the motel's architecture warped around me, corridors stretching and folding in impossible ways. I stumbled into the bathroom on the third floor, desperate for a moment to collect myself. The cracked mirror above the sink reflected a fractured version of my face, splitting into multiple images that whispered incoherent warnings. Each reflection seemed to harbor a different fragment of my identity, as though the motel was fracturing my very self. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices of desperation and resignation, their tones both familiar and alien. Shaking, I backed away until the door creaked open behind me. The night clerk stood there, his pale face unreadable. "You're beginning to see it," he said softly, his voice calm but edged with something ancient and terrible. "The motel isn't bound by your time. It feeds on those who linger, those who cannot leave." "Why?" I demanded, swallowing the lump in my throat. He smiled, faint and knowing. "Because it is cursed. It was born from tragedy, and it sustains itself on the souls caught in its web. I am its guardian, its keeper of cycles." My heart hammered in my chest as the walls seemed to close in. The motel was alive in a way I had never imagined, a predator cloaked in flickering neon and stale cigarette smoke. The night clerk's cryptic words echoed in my mind as I realized that escape might not be possible, not without confronting the darkness at the motel's heart. I wandered the halls, every step a descent deeper into madness. Time fractured around me, clocks spun backward, calendars flipped pages at impossible speeds. Each attempt to break free only tightened the motel's grip, folding me into its endless loop. My identity splintered, memories blurred, and the faces of older versions of myself haunted every corner, each one a ghostly reminder of what I might become. The curse was unfolding, and I was trapped at its center. But somewhere in the shadows, a faint hope flickered. If the motel was a prison, perhaps understanding its nature was the first step toward breaking the cycle. Or perhaps, like the others, I was destined to become another lost soul, forever wandering the shifting halls of Motel Neversleep. As the night deepened and the neon sign outside buzzed erratically, I braced myself for what was to come. The curse was no longer a distant rumor, it was my reality, and the nightmare had only just begun. I woke up that morning in the same room I'd gone to sleep in, but the sunlight filtering through the grimy window felt off, too cold, too distant. The clocks on the nightstand and the hallway outside ticked out of sync, their hands jerking like puppets on frayed strings. I rubbed my temples, trying to shake off the gnawing headache and the weight settling in my chest. Every fiber of my being screamed that I was no longer in control. I decided to test the boundaries. The hallways had already betrayed me too many times with their impossible twists and loops. Today, I would confront the source. The night clerk's office door stood ajar, the flickering neon light from the sign outside casting eerie shadows across the peeling wallpaper. I stepped inside, the stale air rich with the scent of mildew and old cigarettes. He sat behind the counter, his pale face illuminated by a single flickering lamp. His smile was that same unsettling curl I'd seen before, but now it felt more predatory than polite. "Back so soon," he said, voice smooth as silk, but carrying an undertone of menace. "I need answers," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He chuckled softly, a sound that echoed like a hollow bell. "Answers come with a price, friend," I pressed on. "Why won't you let me leave? What is this place?" His eyes glinted unnaturally, like polished obsidian reflecting some dark truth. "This motel doesn't exist in your time. It's a node, a nexus where time folds in on itself. Guests check in, but they never truly leave." "Am I a guest or a prisoner?" I demanded. "Both," he said, standing slowly, "and I am the keeper of the cycle." The room seemed to warp around us, the walls pulsed subtly as if breathing. I stumbled back, heart hammering, the realization crashing over me like a wave. This wasn't just a motel, it was a trap, an eternal limbo. Desperate, I fled the office and back into the hallways that twisted like serpents. I tried to alter my path, turning left instead of right, skipping doors, running past the usual rooms. But no matter what I did, I found myself back where I started, the same flickering neon sign visible through the window at the corridor's end. Each loop twisted my memories, events blurred and overlapped. Faces of guests merged and shifted, becoming versions of me I barely recognized. One older self appeared in a cracked mirror, eyes hollow and voice trembling as he warned, "You're slipping." The motel erases those who resist too hard. Another self, barely more than a shadow, muttered incoherent fragments of my own fears and regrets, his form flickering like a dying flame. I felt my identity unraveling, my sense of time fracturing. Was I becoming one of them? A lost echo trapped forever in this cursed place. I returned to the night clerk's office one last time, determined to force a way out. But the man was gone, replaced by an empty chair and the faint sound of laughter echoing down the hall. Alone, I sank to the floor, the cold seeping into my bones. The motel had won this round, its cursed hospitality swallowing me deeper into its labyrinth of despair. And somewhere beyond, the neon sign flickered methodically, waiting for the next traveler to check in, to become a part of the endless loop. But I would find a way. I had to. Even as my memories splintered and myself slipped away, I clung to the smallest ember of hope. Escape was not just a dream. The motel's nightmarish cycle awaited my next move, and I was already falling deeper into its grasp. The corridor seemed to breathe around me as I paced, the faint hum of fluorescent lights above flickering in a maddening rhythm. I tried to remember if I had taken 3 steps or 4. Each movement felt like a repetition, the same sequence cycling endlessly. Faces appeared in the windows of the rooms, ghostly and shifting. One held the face of an older me, gaunt and haunted, who mouthed words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Don't fight too hard." I felt my resolve waver. But I would not surrender. I pressed forward, deeper into the motel's warped heart, where time fractured and identities fractured with it. The descent had only just begun. The moment I realized I would never leave Motel Neversleep alive came not with a scream or a sudden epiphany, but with a slow, suffocating collapse of hope. I stood in the lobby once again, that same stale air pressing down on me, the night clerk's pale eyes boring into mine with a terrible calm. The walls around us shifted subtly, not with the creak of old timbers, but with a fluid, unnatural pulse. As if the very fabric of reality here was bending and folding like a paper map left out in a storm. "You cannot leave," the clerk said simply, voice as cold and steady as the ticking of a clock whose hands spun backward. "No guest ever truly checks out." I swallowed hard, the taste of dust and despair choking me. "Why? What is this place?" He smiled faintly, but it was a smile without warmth. "A crossroads, a liminal space where time fractures and souls linger. You came here seeking rest, but rest is a lie." The air thickened, and suddenly I was no longer alone. From the shadows emerged figures, older versions of myself, each bearing the weight of years I hadn't yet lived. The grizzled man with hollow eyes, the ghostly figure whose face was a blur of regret, the younger man trembling with confusion. They surrounded me, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fragmented memories and warnings. "We are what you will become," one whispered, "a prisoner of moments lost and repeated." I staggered back, heart pounding as the lines between us blurred. Their faces merged with mine, their fears and pain seeping into my own skin. I could feel the fracture in my identity, the edges of who I was dissolving into something unrecognizable. Desperate, I fled down the twisting corridors, the motel's architecture warping around me. Doors led to impossible places, hallways looped back on themselves, and time warped into a maddening spiral. When I reached the front door, hope ignited briefly, but the handle twisted endlessly in my hand, the glass beyond rippling like a disturbed pond. Outside, the neon sign flickered ominously, casting fractured light on the empty road. I screamed, a raw sound of frustration and terror, but it was swallowed by the motel's hungry silence. Returning to the lobby, the night clerk regarded me with the same unyielding calm. "You must choose," he said. "Embrace the curse and join the others, or resist and lose yourself completely." I felt the pull of the curse, a seductive promise of release through surrender. Yet to resist meant unraveling into nothingness, a dissolution of the self into the void. The choice was a torment with no mercy. As the mist thickened, I felt my form begin to blur and fracture, merging with the older selves who had come before me. The motel's cursed hospitality enveloped me, sealing my fate. Outside, the neon sign's flicker caught the attention of a new traveler, hesitant and unaware of the horrors awaiting inside. The cycle was unbroken, the curse eternal. And so, as my last moments dissolved into the mist, I became part of Motel Neversleep, a ghost in the endless loop, waiting for the next soul to arrive and check into a nightmare that never ends.